about the size of group that I was hoping for in person, so I'm just going to have to pretend that like the 50, 60 people online aren't up there making me nervous.
You won't see them. You won't see their faces or anything.
Yeah, or you just...
You won't see them nodding.
Those of you that didn't sign in when you came in, would you mind getting a sign in sheet on the way?
Beg your pardon?
Sue is just such a task master.
We must follow policy.
Sue, you want to put my name on?
Yes, I can.
Thank you.
And help yourself to snacks.
It's winter again.
Okay, now are they going to be able to hear us with that?
Yep.
Or do I need to turn this mic on?
You need to turn your mic on for Zoom.
I should? Okay. All right, I'm going to do my best to facilitate both in person and online using two different screens. Thank you, Dr. Hartman. You can hear us online. That's great. All right. Okay. Well, we'll go ahead and get started. First of all, thank you all so much for coming today. This has been like a long time coming and in planning. We've had a number of sessions over the past few semesters related to generative AI. Sorry, I need to stay in the frame here. I have to remember that. We were looking to try and come up with something that would be useful, like what has changed since ChatGPT came out in November of 2022, right? Because it's actually been a while, surprisingly. A little bit about me, if you don't know me. My name is Mike Frazier. I'm a third-year PhD student in the Ed Psych and Ed Tech program here in the College of Ed. Former high school English teacher and also a technology K-12 technology integration specialist. So I've been helping teachers to integrate technology into their instruction for several years and have been paying attention with eyes and ears wide open since 2022 and even before. So hopefully, that's what you kind of have with me is someone who's been, paying attention for a while. And I don't see myself necessarily as like the driver, the conductor of the train here in this community of practice. Maybe more like the fire stoker. I'm putting coals in the flame, right, to just kind of keep us moving. But as a community, we're going to decide where the tracks are laid and where we want to go and what we want to learn and discuss. I'll put this up again at the end, but here is a QR code and or a tiny URL if you would like to pull up the slides. We have a couple of interactive activities within the slides. We're going to do a KWL chart and have you add some things to our slideshow. So if you're on a computer and you'd like to type in that tiny URL, or if you'd like to grab it with the QR code, that could work as well. Thank you. My screen sharing was paused. Thank you for letting me know. Now you should be able to see it. Okay. And one more thing before I forget. Thank you so much to Christine Bowman and the Office of Academic Affairs for helping to co-sponsor this with Create for STEM. Our director, Joe Krajcek, and Sue Alexander also did a lot to coordinate the efforts for these sessions, and so I just want to express my gratitude to them as well. Okay, so I wanted to start with something human. Here's a picture of my 9-year-old son, and this was last week when he was doing his math homework. He's in, what grade is he in now? Third grade. He's in third grade, and he's starting to learn order of operations. And we have a Google Home device kind of right next to where he does his homework. Maybe we need to reconfigure that. And he gave me this sly little look that I indicated there with the emoji as I was sitting next to him from where I took this picture as he was working on his math homework. And he started to get a little tired. He was on question 3, I think. If we were to zoom in here, you can see 5 times 7 on question 3. And he just kind of gave me this sly little look to the right where I was sitting, and then a sly little look to the left where the Google Home device was, and he goes, "Hey Google, what's 5 times 7?" And I let it play out because I was like, I want to see what he does. Like, what's this like? And it gave him the answer, and he wrote it down, and then he finished the rest of his homework without saying anything to me or without asking anything from Google. I was like, that was really interesting. We're gonna have to unpack this. There's a lot to unpack there. But I share this because the past 2-3 years, I've been, researching generative AI kind of more from quantitative perspectives, I think, perceptions, ease of use, and that sort of thing. And I've gotten more into the qualitative side of research, looking into like phenomenology, for example. And so I've gotten a bit away from the more mechanistic ways of understanding and more towards like the human ways of understanding. I've kind of had this urge to just turn things off and just like enjoy my time with my son and other people and that sort of thing. And so, just so you're aware of like the context of my research, what I'm interested in now is like sort of phenomenological research questions that are kind of broad and like, what's it like to have AI in your life, have AI show up, right? It's pretty ubiquitous, right? What's it like to be able to be doing your homework and then turn, to the side and ask a robot what the answer is, and like how easy that is. And some of the findings that have been coming up are, a lot of people are worried about, decline of critical thinking and over-reliance on these tools. And so I don't see my son yet over-relying on the tools, but it's interesting and difficult to ask and discuss these questions. So overview for today. I don't know how long we'll have to do introductions, but we'll see if we can, maybe in small groups. We'll calibrate a little bit, like I'll just talk for like 10 minutes or so. In my view, what are some of the big changes in generative AI, especially since 2022? And we'll do small group discussions about what we are interested in exploring in this community of practice in the next couple of sessions. And then I'm going to give a little bit more in-depth demonstrations of a few areas of interest, I think, that have advanced since 2022. And then I have a resource document, a document with a bunch of resources on it that I started, but the intention is that it's sort of a collective, collaborative effort for us to add things and that sort of thing. So the focus of this session, or if you like to think of it in terms of a driving question, how have generative AI tools changed in the last few years, and what do these changes mean for how we do things like teach and learn and engage with students now? And before I get into the content, I just wanted to briefly discuss like what's a community of practice, just so we're all kind of on the same page. So it was defined by Etienne Wenger and colleagues as groups of people who share a concern, a set of problems, or a passion, and deepen their knowledge and expertise by interacting on an ongoing basis. So the idea here is that it's a little bit different from a sort of sit and get professional development session. It's more like, what is localized to our community that's important to us about all of this AI stuff that's going on, and how can we build on that? In the upcoming sessions, I'm going to step back, of course, and we'll have some faculty guest discussants. Jen Vanderheide is going to be here on the 16th to talk about an ongoing project that she's working on. And then we have a couple other people lined up for the 30th that I'll probably announce on the 16th. But with that to say, if anyone here or online is interested in becoming a guest discussant and helping to lead these discussions, feel free to let me know and we can talk. Okay, so what is old? This is a slide from a previous session that Dr. Lachny and I did last spring. So this was over a year ago now, and I recognize some faces who were there. So that is, and I put that up there also, if you're interested in it, there's the link there to the video recording on Create for STEM's YouTube. If you're interested in like a general introduction, basic introduction to generative AI, that's a great session. to look at. And you'll notice some of the resources that we shared last year are maybe not as relevant now. There's a lot on prompt engineering, for example, but prompt engineering is kind of getting out because of some of these newer reasoning models and their capabilities that we're going to talk about today. So that's one kind of big takeaway, is that prompt engineering is becoming slightly less useful as these models get more powerful. Oh, I forgot I had animations here. So here's some current conversations that you might be interested in. And these are all going to be in that Google Doc as well. So I started with a Pew Research poll, how the US public and AI experts view artificial intelligence. That's a great resource. There's some fairly significant discrepancies between the two groups, if you'd like to look into that. The second one came across my notifications at 6 o'clock last night, and I was like, okay, no more. This is the last one before the presentation, but I think it's a really, really good one, and so I've added it to my slides even. This is Anthropic, the company that has developed Claude. Anthropic has done some really interesting things in the space of education lately. And so here is a report on how university students have been using Claude, and we're going to go more in depth in that today. Anthropic also put out a very detailed and thorough guide about how to understand one of their models, and it's called On the Biology of a Large Language Model. Highly recommend looking into that as well if you're interested in how these newer models function. And then I am probably always, as long as he's still posting every day, I'm going to continue to recommend following Professor Ethan Malik from UPenn. He is probably one of the biggest voices related to AI in education, for education purposes. And I draw on a lot of his work for this presentation. And so some of the things he talks about, today we're going to talk about vibe coding and vibe working, which is something I think that has kind of come out of these newer models. He also has some recommendations for maybe when we could use AI, and those 15 I think are mostly based on empirical research. And then the 5 not to, I don't know about those, but if you're concerned about when should we use AI and when shouldn't we, that's a good read as well. And then if you're like, oh geez, these models change every semester, every year, which AI should I be using now? That's there's another guide there, which was last updated in February, but hopefully it's still fairly current. Okay, where are we at with tools? This is by no means an exhaustive list, and this was curated by a company called EdTech Insiders. So it's a little bit focused on EdTech type of tools, but you can see here and look into more. There's just so much. I tried out a few of these, and I could show you Magic School, for example, has been kind of interesting to look at. But we also have more traditional teaching tools that have gotten AI functions like Quizlet and Kahoot and that sort of thing. So I also linked to that website if you're interested in looking into any more of those. Okay, so obviously there's a lot of stuff, but we want to kind of localize it, right? So I'm going to put our Zoom attendees in breakout rooms, and then our face-to-face attendees, maybe you can kind of turn and form a small group as you are working on this. So if you're able to put some contributions into our slides, that will be wonderful, or if at least one person in your group has access to the slides, and maybe I'll put that QR code back up on this slide too. But what we're looking for now is what do we already know about ChatGPT and generative AI tools like it. Could be news, updates, that sort of thing, things that you've seen come across in your research or your teaching. And what do we wonder? What do we want to learn more about? And so we'll use those as kind of anchors in this community of practice to figure out what we want to explore more in later sessions and in our discussions today. So I'll go ahead and move to this slide. put this up again just for a moment if you'd like to get a link to the slides or use that QR code if you want to type it in.
Your slides appear to be view only, part of it.
Oh, I'm sorry. One moment. Thank you for letting me know. Okay, should have edit access now.
I can get right now to read it. I have my home one, but it's still seeming reset. So I need to refresh it. I got my laptop out. I don't know how to
Yeah, no, I can speak to it.
And I wrote down what the questions are, so I can. Okay, good. So what do we know?
So do we know?
I think we know that ChatGPT
The unknown unknown.
is this what?
Sorry, Mark, as soon as you asked that question, thank you.
We still get misinformation.
Oh.
And I think that's really important.
He's no longer on.
It's getting better.
He's got some other radio.
But it's
you
still,
know,
we still get.
Oh, that's right.
It's not Michael Bell because he was with.
Geography, that's fine. Machine results, knowledge expert. Yeah, it's close. It's not quite.
Right.
Wikipedia, almost like Wikipedia. That's a lot of information.
Okay.
I work inside of Central IT, and so I'm always, like, I don't have a license, I'm using the free version, so
Okay,
I'm
Michelle, so what do
always
you know?
confused. I'm using with my work, that whole privacy piece of what's right for universities versus academic research uses, so it's kind of appropriate use.
Yes, right, we don't understand.
We don't understand what they're doing.
Yeah, and I think that's a good thing to clarify,
When
that's
the
something that,
university is
people
gonna
ask
system that
like,
we
is
can
the question,
use.
what do we actually?
Exactly what you said. Right, so we don't have to worry about that. We do have the ability to be conscious. Well, I know that we're discussing the ChatGPT.
And why would we develop
They're gonna try to get licenses or something, lawyers that we can do single sign-ons, that will get us to a place that we can use. Right, we said a generative AI tool like ChatGPT. Right. So we could have our own generative system.
Which is a frightening thought.
Yeah, so I think
Have a
what we mean by that,
and that we
by
can
the
trust.
black box,
Right, and that's what we really do need to set up. You have one.
you can have.
Lots of
it
places have
the
one. We can't afford that.
right,
So I think what's
rates
happening
that
is
are
they're working on
learners.
contracts.
You don't know what those.
While they have it in
different
place with
dimensions
Microsoft,
represent, so you can
but
guess
it's
what
still,
they represent, but they don't always
it's still
relate
starting
to
out
humans.
with,
So that means that there's meaning in
Yeah, I
the
think there are opportunities,
that
the
we
computing
don't
center
understand.
can't computing
But then
center.
how did that?
There are models for which
So there's this
all
huge
of
amount of
the
training
tasks
data.
are done.
That's where I'm
Models,
and then what is happening at the code of that training
and this
meaning
shows to
automatically from that training data. And I don't know.
Local, I'm sorry,
Like
so
how,
how it's doing.
how is it, yeah, how does it assign the weight?
It's just that I looked at all these other corpus of data, and when this is where the likelihood of the next word is here, the assigned probability of each word.
Right, okay.
And so then the other piece of that is indeterminate.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's the black box.
nothing would ever.
Algorithms generally don't do this.
Yeah, it's parameterized, right, so you can set the creativity.
I don't think they.
But it's still, it's prediction, right, like.
I don't think OpenAI is.
Is that why it's gonna be different?
It's a great tool.
Like I have this
Brainstorm.
analysis on that.
Find the position.
One of my lab
I know
mates
very little.
that did the latent profile
Suddenly,
analysis,
all the
signing
always
students to
follow
motivate
up on it.
fostering basically.
You will,
So there's here, can't observe.
finish off.
So that's I am trying to
Right, we've got a
do
question.
modeling that takes the motivation.
But I like that idea.
I have similar experiences. So I teach them in CMC.
That would be.
Current models can generate code for every new model just has it better, and some are better than plot actually.
Yeah.
See in this context.
Variability and how it.
And often they'll generate something
Well-
in my expertise.
When you mentioned model though, Michelle, I'm also thinking, especially thinking about all the covariates, has it really taken into account all the covariates that can go into that? Even with the medical, all the different things that may influence what you're seeing. So with these large language models, you know, Martha, you're saying, okay, when I see this word, there's a probability that the next one is this. But how does it factor all those other factors that can enter in, determine what that next word is? And so that's kind of that human dimension weighted stuff that you mentioned, Michelle. But even if we didn't know how we did that, would it?
I really like
Because you're definitely gonna see would not get the same answer all the time.
And I promise you we're not AI.
Not even that.
I checked.
Yeah, I don't.
Should the instructors be conscious about
Liability
let's say,
perspective.
Europeans is a skill in this particular field?
Old instances, but I mean, I think one of the airlines, it's AI help systems and told the customer.
The other important part is I would like to know more.
Right?
The policy.
I try to read the literature more about what's
Held accountable for what the AI.
See if the role of AI is
Who gets
there's a lot of discussion in the model trying to figure it out for them.
Yeah,
How it should
exactly.
work, what should happen. But if you start talking to students, they're going to be doing some of the smarter part.
And Michelle, you said something that's
Do
interesting.
you use it? If you
Even the
don't, why?
developers
There's a lot of
are saying that you aren't sure what's in the
where they say things like, I'm not going to
I
learn.
mean, they build neural
They can self-identify
for
the feedback. I think if we don't hear from them, then we can address your development.
Right.
the world's internet.
So it is being black box then.
And I want to make sure they're not losing.
Wow. A little concerned.
And so I'm curious to figure out what is the best way for institutions like MSU to understand
Yes,
what
you
this
should,
is.
of course.
As far as
A few more minutes.
Because even, you know, not too long
Our
ago,
brains are black boxes.
a lot of faculty still say,
Assume
I want my class to be one
agency and accountability.
Right?
Where does the buck stop? Who do we put in jail?
Which would be helpful, like this far with it.
Right,
What's the
right.
middle ground,
Yeah. God, that is.
well, and we maybe try to look at
Our whole legal system is
tools
prevalent
that are sort of
determining,
grounded in knowledge
capable
of
of
the course.
being responsible for your actions.
It's not motivation. Some students, even though we said this is tuned on our curriculum.
But again, even going with a discussion about black boxing and AI, what, if you and I are asked the same question, we're gonna come with a different answer because we have different.
So even though we're providing
in our head.
instructors is more beneficial, perhaps to help them discuss.
This is a way, I mean, because you're treating it as.
Some students still do it.
Exactly, right there, that's it. That's it.
You know, we think about why,
I mean, we always defer to Mark, but just for sake of argument here.
we all that's what we know, then we lost.
So you guys.
Right, so we have to make sure.
Anything good you
We need to train generative models to be
Oh,
more
actually,
practical, so it just doesn't give kids answers.
Oh, because you're not logged in.
That's important, right? Because we don't form
Is it
connections.
explainable or is it unexplainable?
Oh, did you say honest?
Right, this is always an issue
It's just not a.
with education, it's always focused on facts, not connections between facts. Right, so we can't give up
Just as
that
well,
that
that's
knows
what
what kids form connections.
So what do we wonder?
In order to achieve that goal, a lot of the work
The economic circle is just
first of all, needs to find
Maybe start to finish up your conversation.
Yeah, well, we have to help them understand that it's connection, and you can, this is why having our own systems, no matter how we set it up, right? But there are systems on campus that just don't allow kids to log in and say, give me this response, right? We want the ChatGPT to come back and be more Socratic. And this is what we're doing in some of our research.
Yeah, I'm just reading these and I
Give
was
feedback
wondering, what I
and
said
better
first thing,
assessments.
when will.
Not to give them the answer,
Is
to
that
give them feedback,
discussion
push them.
Yeah, I think
There's
there
an
is.
interesting element of that. We've been using a tool that does that, and we have some evidence because you get the results of the student conversations, anonymous student conversations with the AI assistant, and you'll see some students who are using it exactly the way that we want, like saying, "No, are you talking about this or this on the one that I'm not thinking?" And they're like, "The answers are like, how do I solve this problem?" Well, how do you think you should start? How do I solve this problem?
Change everything's.
Well, like, what would you do first? I don't know what to do first. How do I solve this problem? What should I do? Engage, and then you watch them. At that point, in some cases, we talk first.
What
Well,
concentrated thinking?
refuse to give me
That's interesting.
a real challenge
Chatting
of
with
convincing
your
them that
relatives.
that cognitive process is so important, right? And I think that's where it's going to be communicated.
All right, 30 seconds.
I'll learn it to our students.
When all four of us can think about 3 times 5 equals what? We're in a good example, right? But if I multiply big number together, I got my calculator all the time. Oh, this is a big number.
Yeah.
That's a synthesis of dignity built on other
Otherwise, they can't
Exactly.
understand more.
So
Somebody who's gonna get short,
right, so he had something, some form of algorithm that could take all of the output of
Because
those
that's what we have
models
to do, we have to
and synthesize and say, here's what's going on. But still, that box, but I don't know, he just said he was a little nervous, but he said,
but he also has expertise to go into the output of those models
Exactly.
and say, is
This
this answer
makes
making any
sense.
sense? I mean, when I've been mentioning this, I've been able to say, does this make sense?
Does it make sense?
You know,
Yeah.
Did you type it?
places where I
I did, yeah. Some of it's in there.
knowledge.
Definitely did not catch all of
just
that.
grabbing what
Right.
you're saying and bringing it.
I did not catch all of that.
But we also know there are people out there who don't.
Again, what's the,
Yeah, we could,
All right, I hate to cut off good conversation, but that's what I'm here for, I guess. All right, so I heard lots of great conversation in person. There was a lot of typing happening online. We weren't able to figure out the breakout groups, unfortunately, but still lots of great collective knowledge creation happening and sense making. So we can start to kind of look over these. What do we know? What do we wonder? Some great points here that currently available models still provide misinformation and can make things up. Access to web information is capped at a historical moment, which is not necessarily current, and therefore could be missing information. Yeah, for the most part, yes. One change since ChatGPT came out, multimodality. Yes, that's also one that I'm going to be talking about today. This is an interesting one, a shift from teaching about generative AI to teaching with generative AI. I'll talk more about that. It's kind of probably fairly in line with Ethan Mollick's perspective of collaborating with AI in the future. There's also some things about what about MSU related stuff, right? Of course, because we're here. So great point, MSU, we currently have access to Copilot through Spartan 365, and I think on the IT website it says Gemini and ChatGPT coming soon. And I don't have any more information about that, maybe some of you do, but yeah, there's a lot of issues with explainability as well in AI. And then we get into issues of what about when we're doing this stuff with students, with minors, for example. There's a whole lot more questions and worries that can come into this. Great things there. So I'll review all of this and maybe send out a summary or something like that of the things that we are wondering about and learning, yes, you're right, I could use ChatGPT. It's a good idea. What do we wonder? Like, there's a lot. Yeah, what about trust? What about privacy, security? How do students view, right, the role of generative AI? That's something that I'm exploring right now with undergraduates across campus. A lot of them are worried. How do we create effective agents? Agents are another thing that might come up, right? That we seem to be kind of working towards. And then, yeah, best practices for supporting student use. That's a great question. Okay, so now I would like to do a bit of a deeper dive into some of the things that I think you will find interesting. And then we'll come back to this sort of content generation with what we learned or what we'd like to further explore in a few slides. Okay, I wanted to start with this report from Anthropic that came out last night because I thought it was particularly interesting. There are some limitations here, but the findings are really interesting. So this is one of the first, according to Anthropic, one of the first large-scale studies of real-world AI usage patterns in higher education. They analyzed 1 million anonymized student conversations on Claude. So keep in mind, this is just Claude usage. It's not ChatGPT or any other tools. But here are their findings. STEM students were early adopters of AI tools like Claude, with computer science students particularly overrepresented. In contrast, business, health, humanities students showed lower adoption rates relative to their enrollment numbers. And they identified 4 patterns, which they organized into a matrix that I'm going to show on the next, the next slide. And this was the interesting part to me. So how the students interact with AI, and actually let me just go to probably the matrix for a second. So they found that students were largely interacting with AI in these particular ways. So in direct ways, like give me something, or do something for me, right? Maybe that was a problem solving, right? Solve this problem for me, or for output creation, right? Create a summary or a lesson plan or something like that. Create it for me. So these are more direct and sort of offloading those cognitive tasks to generative AI. The more collaborative versions of problem solving and output creation are like, instead of do it for me, help me do it, right? Help me learn how to do it, right? Teach me programming fundamentals. Or iterative refinement, right? With the output creation. You're not just giving it a bunch of directions, getting an output and copying, pasting that, right? You are refining iteratively, and you're sort of collaborating with the AI. And the interesting, if I go back a slide, the interesting finding, I thought, was that all of those usages were roughly present in their data at approximately equal rates. And that was really a really interesting finding for me too. I was recently working on a study that kind of found, anecdotally with a much smaller sample size, similar things. That about half the students were saying, do this for me, analyze this, create this, and help me, versus help me analyze this or create this. And what I love about this is that they used Bloom's taxonomy to organize students' results. So they primarily used AI for creating and analyzing, which are, if you're familiar with Bloom's taxonomy, are fairly high on that cognitive thinking. So that doesn't necessarily mean that they're offloading the cognitive tasks, although some of them definitely are with the direct, right? About half, apparently. But some of them are also collaborating with the AI, and I've read some findings recently that experts in particular tend to be better at getting products when they collaborate with AI than novices do. Okay, so that's one update. Interesting. How students are using, undergraduate students are using AI, and also this taxonomy I thought was particularly interesting from Anthropic. Another big update is these reasoning models, right? And they are really complicated, and I don't entirely know how they work. And I don't think the people who make them even know how they work entirely. But it has led to some very interesting developments. So these new reasoning models, if you're familiar with the original ChatGPT, the way that, when it came out, the way that it worked is it's text generation. It's statistically, right, trying to figure out what your next word is going to be based on its training data. This is a little bit different in that the developers have gone in and say, okay, well at this point you should do X if user says Y, and then so they've gone in essentially to make these models think kind of in a way that humans do, like break down their thought process, because they found that when they forced the AI to break down its thought process, that it had much better performance on complex problems. And that's actually a prompting strategy we used to use with ChatGPT, is like break this down into steps. But now it's kind of able to do that on its own. And this has led to a concept called vibe coding, which was coined by Andrej Karpathy, a co-founder of OpenAI and a big AI leader. And then Ethan Mollick kind of talks about and expands this concept to include vibe work with AIs in line with his collaborative and pragmatic and, in my opinion, sometimes overly optimistic views that he talks about in his book, for example, Co-Intelligence, Living and Working with AI. Highly recommend. Okay, so what is vibe coding and what is vibe work? Essentially, it's this idea that the models are so useful now that we don't have to prompt engineer nearly as much. We can just kind of talk to the models. This, in fact, blog post written by Ethan Mollick is titled "Speaking Things into Existence." You can just kind of talk to AI now and have it create things for you and give it feedback. So here's a great example that he posted in his blog. So he used, I think it was Claude, and he gave it 4 simple prompts. And the prompts, we'll start with the first one. The very first thing I typed into Claude Code was, make a 3D game where I can place buildings of various designs and then drive through the town I create. And that's all and then he did a little bit of follow-up. Maybe I control a fire truck, need to put fires out in the buildings, add traffic and stuff. Right. Looking better, but the fire truck changes appearance when moving. The wheels are suddenly appearing. It looks very 1980s. Make it all look so much better. And then, maybe some details. Can I reset the board? Can you make the buildings look more real? Can you add an arrival helicopter that's trying to extinguish the fires before me? So those are literally the prompts, the only prompts that he used, according to him, for Claude, and created this. And you'll see how the game updates when he overlays the prompt on the video as well. My 9-year-old would love this. So that's really interesting. So there's an example of vibe coding. There's the arrival helicopter. What I thought was really interesting, actually I just noticed, was the options up in the top left. We've got these graphics, this playable game, but I don't think he even asked for these things in the top left, and it gave it to him. The build mode versus drive mode, you've got different things you can place. Instructions, yeah, exactly. That's really interesting. And so he uses that as an example of vibe coding, and then he kind of extends that to vibe working with expertise. And he talks about how experts in particular domains are able to do this to a fairly effective extent. Okay, so what about the updates in the models? I've I've gotten tired over the past couple of years looking at graphs like this, but for our sake, we'll put one more up. Now, I put this one up because these new reasoning models, and one of them being the O1 Pro and the other one O3 up here, have been purported in the news as like almost having like a PhD in your pocket, and that sort of thing. And even this graph, from the graduate level Google Proof Q&A test, right, series of multiple choice problems. And then they have, human PhD using Google outside their specialty. Okay, so the models have outperformed that. And then now apparently they're up here, converging towards the human PhD using Google in their own field. Okay, that's a little worrisome, probably to many of you. Definitely to me as a PhD student. So let's test that. It seems like we're moving towards more agentic versions of AI. And we can see that if you have the $200 version of ChatGPT, for example. I don't, but you might have access to that. I do have access to the deep research though, and so I wanted to show that to you as well. And this headline, actually, the year, what was it? It was 2022. That was 2 years after I finished being a high school English teacher, and this article came across my feed that said the death of the English essay or something, death of English class. And I was like, oh, geez. And now it's now questioning the value of PhDs. So a little worrisome. But yeah. So I do really want to put this to the test. So I linked you to ChatGPT's deep research, Gemini's deep research, and Perplexity's deep research. Those are the ones that I know of. If there are others, we can add them up here. But I've only tried, for transparency, ChatGPT's. And I just put an example of what it could look like in the links. And in short, it's cool, but I won't be replaced yet, hopefully. Yet. So here's what I said. Are you able to scrape posts on LinkedIn with deep research? I was hoping that I could just offload this entire presentation to ChatGPT and just go through Ethan Mollick's LinkedIn and then what are all the updates and then put them in here. It didn't work, unfortunately. But it was an interesting starting point, I'll say that. And also it said no, and I'm pretty sure it can, so I said, yeah, you can. Can you access the, I gave it the link to his feed, and it was then able to find, yes, okay, so here are some posts from Ethan Mollick, here's the links are working, that's great. And then I said, okay, I want to use this for my community practice sessions. You remember the topics for our generative AI COP sessions? These are wrong. So they were close enough though for my purposes. And so I gave it the list that I had started myself, the list of resources, which I'll show you in a little bit. I said, this is what I have so far. I'd like to utilize your deep research function to identify more resources to add to this list based on the given categories. And so I gave it some examples, and then I was hoping for more for these other categories. Okay. And then I think I had something glitched out there, and then I clicked on the deep research button, and if you're curious, that's what you have to do if you want to engage deep research. And then something interesting happens, right? Instead of the old ChatGPT that would just kind of finish the sentence, or psychophantic kind of things where it's just kind of trying to please you, what it does before it, it's gone. What it does before it engages in deep research is that it asks you follow-up and clarifying questions, which I thought was really interesting, so that it can do its research more effectively. Let's see. And then it takes 8-15 minutes sometimes. It really varies. And when it's working, on the right side you'll see it's thought process, and it'll say reading this website, and it'll link you to the website, and I'm reading about self-efficacy over here and what the scholars are doing with that, and so you can kind of follow its thought process, which is helpful. And what I found largely, by the way, I didn't use any of this output in the presentation if you're wondering. Not necessarily because it was unhelpful, but it's it reminds me kind of like a Wikipedia page where like it's just a bunch of gathered information that might be useful. The links are working and that's great. One significant limitation is that it doesn't have access to things that are behind any kind of paywall. And so you won't be able to get a whole lot of scholarly work necessarily with this. But like a Wikipedia page, I guess, it's kind of useful to start your reading. So there's that. Okay, so those are some of the updates. Obviously not all of the updates. There are other things happening like with image generation, for example, that I'm less in touch with. But I'm more in touch with like the sort of multimodal inputs and outputs, which is getting interesting. I think I saw someone write a question up here about, where did it go? Yeah, when will we be able to interface? Oh gosh, there's so much now. This is wonderful, okay. When will we be able to interface many sources of information without the need to manually insert that information into the central hub? That's a great question. I don't have the answer. I don't know if very many people do. But I think that's the general direction that we're headed, is that these models are becoming more useful, especially if we know what we want out of them. Okay, so that's the majority of what I have for you. I have one more thing, if my cursor starts working again. Okay, we're frozen, I guess. One moment. Over here.
TV finished airplay.
Okay.
Figure child in lock fill button. User button.
All right. One moment.
Finish receiving airplay.
Interesting. All right, well, apologies. I'll see if I can get that working again. But hopefully you have access to the slides. And so we just have one more slide. In slide 19, there's a link to the set of resources that I started curating. So feel free to start looking at those. So that includes a lot of, sure. Thank you so much. Things are happening. I don't know. Stop extending. Need to change something here? Looks right, it's HD. Okay. All right, well, that's fine. We can adjust. We've got about 10 minutes left or so. So take about, we'll say 5 minutes, look over slides 18, 19, where we've got that, like, what did we learn? So that's the L part of the KWL. What did you learn? What are also some lingering wonders, things you're still wondering about that you would like to dig more into? So that's on slide 18. Slide 19 has the set of resources that I started curating, but I am not an expert on all things AI in education, obviously. And this is a community, right? So I would love for contributions. If you come across anything interesting or anything that you see that's missing from that set of resources, feel free to either email to me or you could just comment in that Google Doc. You should have comment access. And so let's take the next 5 minutes or so. Feel free to converse with your group and add some things to slide 18 about stuff you've learned, stuff you're still wondering about, and then we'll have a few people, maybe in person and maybe a couple online, share out at the end.
I mean, they're making improvements. Well, this last comment, it's going to quote replace the PhD. Yeah, right.
It's still a whole choice.
Exactly. Right, and since one is a collection of facts, really.
She finished receiving your flag.
He's actually one of the original guys that got involved in AI. He apparently plays with ChatGPT all the time. And he says he gets amazing stuff from it. But I've never seen it.
She finished receiving your flag.
I'm still very cautious about giving too much information.
But again, is that what a PhD is?
Yeah, I think a PhD is pretty
It's Microsoft Skin.
35%.
So what's the advantage of this? Well,
But, I mean, if somebody gave me a PhD level physics, I'm like, oh, 35%, I'd be doing great.
MSU and Microsoft. So that's the benefit of using Copilot.
Again,
It's free. And it's what version? I don't know. I wonder. Information would be helpful for us to know if you
So, Michelle, I think what I'm saying is that
because they do have those advanced
very useful tools for retrieving
ChatGPT
stuff that
does
you
have
can
advanced
use.
Well, and then there's also.
So, and I know gentleman right now, he is ChatGPT all the time,
That's not.
and because he pull different ideas, I think when let you this,
Alert, remote, connected.
Right, but then he has the HT, so on the grid that he had on the former slide.
yeah, I thought that was interesting.
Finished your movie YouTube. Recently on music pocket settings. Row 2. TTV. General. Button. 1 of settings. Row 2. Column 6.
If it's something that I just want, Google.
Just that page license.
Finished receiving your flag.
Yeah, this certainly piqued my interest, especially with
Somebody
the
has a response. Oh, I wrote a proposal about that. You can say, hey, put my,
Yeah.
look at this proposal, which lives on my OneDrive. Say, I navigate by this file, how do you generate a reply to this based on the first summarize all your
What do you need to do?
everything actually in OneDrive. Teams ecosystem, all that is interior.
And then he goes back. That's your next one. Need to know enough about AI to know. So that's the first one.
This is right, it's all references and conversations
I keep heading back to it.
exactly among faculty. It's always interesting. The first thing here is, mom's gonna grade my assessments and students do it. And how much is a lot of campus still around, and do we know? That's why they're long after. You know, the world. algorithms can generate problems. It's not realms for people.
So I can just go.
Real spreadsheet, so I
You ask it about running a
you think about it, trying to test.
Exactly.
That's a lot of work. Change is bad.
You have to click on the set and ask the final chat.
You know what, I mean, back in the day, the argument was about calculators. And I remember having to sit there and, why am I taking all my test time doing some squares by hand? What am I demonstrating?
No, not by default. But I can help you drive.
The metaphor I heard a long time ago about that was, you know, you sit there, you look at the fact that you're moving that, and Johnny's later, and say, what time is it? We'll do this. Because years ago, our uneducated person was thinking about science.
That's right.
What time it was. So we should be teaching So, I hear it's cheaper than, it's an ongoing conversation.
Well,
Changing the conversation.
I started getting ChatGPT 4 from Premier involved in Copilot as a standalone.
Think about, so how does it teach students to be critical?
Well, you hit it earlier, Mark. I mean, that's it.
Right.
Go ahead, give us the assignment. Go look this stuff up. Now you tell me.
That's what we need to do.
You agree? Why? Do you disagree? Why? Is this quality?
How do you know?
How do you know? How do you know? Right. Well, they might. They actually might do that. This is true. Yeah, this is true.
Let's look this script.
The idea of
And speaking of that, I mean, I look at some of these numbers, students are coming in 162, and the difficulty is machine scoring. I mean, I know that it's wrong.
Nice meeting you, by the way.
I look at this, and I'm thinking of using this actually as scoring for assessments.
We can talk more.
We talked about the
Yes.
All right. Feel free to stay for a little while. I think we got about, we have the space for like 15 more minutes, I think. So feel free to stay if you like, and I'll stay as well for any small conversations, whatever works. Couple of things to wrap up. We're going to have another session next week, same time, same place. And again, we're going to have Dr. Jen Vanderhyde joining us as a guest discussant to talk about some of the work that she's doing. And then we're going to have a couple of other guest discussants on the 30th, which I'll announce next week. And then, of course, we had some tech issues today, but we're going to work them out. We'll make sure things are better for next time. But I think it, largely went fairly well today. And if you still, thank you, appreciate it. And if you still need the link to the slides, I can put it here on my computer, and you can come get it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Your original statement, it just bothered me about the as we are looking at using the machine learning assessments. It's like, is there, yeah, I know we're training it, but is